Only those who listen until the very end will grasp the full horror that awaits, and I promise it will haunt every corner of your mind. The game begins. The night was not dark the way nights are supposed to be dark, soft and gentle, wrapping the world in a quiet blanket of sleep. No, this night was sharp. This night had teeth. Jo had known Kai for exactly 11 years, 3 months, and 4 days. She knew how he laughed, that low, rolling sound that started somewhere deep in his chest. She knew how he hummed when he was nervous, a tuneless little melody that never went anywhere. She knew the way he always tapped his left foot twice before speaking, like he was knocking on a door inside himself before he let words come out. What she did not know, what she could not have known, was that Kai had been gone for 6 weeks. The old house on Mercer Street sat at the very end of the block where the street lights had been broken since October, and no one had bothered to fix them because no one really walked down Mercer Street anymore. The house belonged to nobody. The house belonged to everybody who had ever been afraid of something and could not name what it was. 3 stories of peeling white paint and black windows and a front door that hung slightly open. Always, no matter how many times the neighbors down the road tried to push it shut. "We shouldn't go in," Lena said. She was the third one, the one who always said the thing everyone else was thinking. Jo did not look at her. Jo was already staring at the open door, at that thin strip of darkness behind it that seemed to breathe in and out, very slowly, like something sleeping. "Kai is inside," Jo said. Not a guess. A fact. She could feel it the way you feel thunder before it arrives. Something deep in the bones, some old animal part of the brain whispering a warning that the rest of the mind does not want to hear. "You don't know that," Marcus said. He was the tallest of the 3 of them, the broad-shouldered one who always walked a little ahead of everyone else. He had his phone out, the flashlight cutting a pale wedge into the dark. His hand, Jo noticed, was not entirely steady. "He texted me from this address," Jo said. She held her own phone out so they could see the message. 3 words. That was all. 3 words that made no sense, and every kind of terrible sense at the same time. The message read, "Come find me." She had texted back 17 times. She had called 9 times. There had been no response. Only silence, and the thin blue check mark that meant the messages had been delivered, which meant the phone was on, which meant someone was holding it and choosing not to reply, and the part of her that loved Kai did not want to think too carefully about what that meant. The inside of the house smelled like wet soil and something else, something sweetish and rotten, the kind of smell that sits at the back of the throat and does not leave. Marcus went first, because he was the one who always went first, and Lena went second because she was afraid of being last, and Jo went last because she had stopped for just one moment on the threshold, looking down. There was a footprint in the dust just inside the door. One footprint. Bare. Going in. Not coming out. "Guys," she said. Her voice came out wrong. Too thin. Too high. She cleared her throat. "Guys, look at this." Marcus brought his flashlight down. They all looked at the footprint. Nobody said anything for a long moment. "It's just a footprint," Marcus said, which was the kind of thing people say when they are trying very hard to believe something simple in a place that does not feel simple. Lena crouched down close to it. "It's fresh," she said quietly. "The dust around it. It's still falling back into place." Jo looked up at the staircase. It was the kind of staircase that existed in the back of bad dreams. Wide at the bottom, narrowing toward the top, the steps themselves dark and warped, some of them buckled upward at the edges, as if something from underneath had been pressing up from below. The banister was gone on the right side. Just empty air where it should have been, and a 3-foot drop into the dark hollow of the ground floor. From somewhere above them, from the 2nd floor, maybe the 3rd, there came a sound. A sound like knocking. 2 knocks. A pause. 2 more. Jo felt her blood go still in her veins. She stood up straight. Kai knocked twice before he spoke. Always. 2 knocks on a door inside himself. "He's upstairs," she said, and she was already moving toward the staircase before either of them could stop her, her sneakers raising small ghosts of dust from the floor, her phone's flashlight swinging forward into all that darkness ahead. Marcus grabbed her arm. "Jo, wait. Just wait. Something isn't right. He's been missing 6 weeks," she said. She did not shake him off. She did not need to. The look she gave him was enough. "He's right upstairs. I can hear him." Lena stood very still in the middle of the hallway. Her face had gone the color of old wax. "Jo," she said, very carefully, very slowly. The text came from this address. But, sweetheart, Kai's phone was found in a field in Holden County 3 weeks ago. The police have it. I saw it on the news. The knocking came again from upstairs. 2 knocks. A pause. 2 more. Jo stopped walking. She stopped walking, but she did not go back. She stood on the 4th stair from the bottom with the flashlight aimed upward and the darkness above swallowing most of the light. And she thought about the text message, "Come find me." And she thought about the footprint in the dust. And she thought about the knocking that sounded exactly, perfectly, precisely like Kai. Because Kai had a specific knock. A knock that nobody else knew about. A knock that was just between the two of them. Something they had invented when they were 12 years old, and she had lived next door, and they used to knock on the shared wall between their bedrooms when they could not sleep. 2 knocks. A pause. 2 more. It meant, "I am here." It meant, "You are not alone." Nobody else knew that knock. So either Kai was upstairs, or something knew that knock was the one thing that would make her climb. She climbed anyway. Not because she was brave. She had never thought of herself as brave. She was the kind of person who checked under the bed every night until she was 19 and who still slept with the bathroom light on. She climbed because the alternative was to walk away from this house and never know. And she had learned a long time ago that the not knowing was always worse than the truth, no matter what the truth turned out to be. The stairs groaned under her weight. The whole house seemed to tighten around her as she rose, the walls pressing inward very slightly, the air growing heavier and colder with every step, and that smell, the wet soil and the sweet rot, growing stronger, wrapping around her like fingers. The second-floor landing was a long hallway with 4 doors, all 4 closed. No light came through the gaps beneath any of them. The floor up here was carpeted in something dark. It might have been green once, decades ago, before the mold got into it, and the color went gray and strange. Jo's footsteps were almost silent on it. That was somehow worse. She wanted to hear herself moving. The silence felt like it was listening. "Kai," she called out, and her voice came out small and swallowed, as if the house had absorbed it before it could go anywhere. "Kai, it's Jo. I'm here. Just tell me which room." "Nothing." She stood in the middle of the hallway for a long, terrible moment, flashlight sweeping left and right, and then the knocking came again, much closer this time, loud enough to feel in her teeth, from the door directly at the far end of the hall. 2 knocks. A pause. 2 more. "I'm coming," she said. She walked toward the door. 1 step. 2. 3. The carpet seemed to pull at her feet slightly, the way carpet does when it is very wet, and she did not look down because she did not want to see what was making it wet. She kept her eyes on the door. The door was ordinary. White. A brass handle. Nothing about it was wrong in any visible way, and that felt like its own kind of wrong. She put her hand on the handle. It was warm. Not room temperature warm. Not the warmth of metal that has been sitting in a closed space. Body warm. The warmth of something alive pressed against the other side. She opened the door. Kai was sitting in the corner of the empty room, his back against the wall, his knees pulled up to his chest, his head down. He was wearing the same clothes she had last seen him in. The gray hoodie with the small tear at the left cuff, the dark jeans, the white sneakers that were no longer white. He was very still. "Kai." She crossed the room in 4 steps, dropped to her knees in front of him, grabbed his shoulders. "Kai, I'm here. It's okay. I'm here." He raised his head. His eyes were open and they were the right color. That light brown she had known since they were 6 years old. And his face was his face. The long jaw and the small scar on his chin from a bicycle fall when he was 9 and the particular way his eyebrows sat when he was sad. Everything was right. Everything was exactly right. Except that he did not seem to see her. His eyes were open, but they were not looking at her. They were looking at something very far away, something past the walls of the room, past the house, past everything. And his lips were moving, but no sound was coming out. "Kai," she said. She shook him, gently at first, then harder. "Kai, look at me. Look at my face." His lips kept moving. She leaned in close, close enough to hear his breath, which was very slow, much too slow, and she could just barely catch the shape of the words he was forming over and over and over. It was not her name. It was not real. Not real. Not real. She heard Marcus and Lena on the stairs behind her, heard Marcus saying her name in that low, urgent whisper, and she turned and opened her mouth to tell them she had found him. She had actually found him, and then she saw the shadow on the wall. The shadow on the wall was wrong. Her flashlight was pointed at Kai. Her flashlight was therefore behind her, aimed forward, which meant her shadow should have been thrown toward the far wall, ahead of her, stretched and tall, which meant the shadow directly to her right, standing against the wall of the room, very still, the size and rough shape of a person, should not have been there. There was nothing for it to belong to. No object, no person, just the shadow, standing against the wall, with its head slightly tilted to one side, watching. Jo did not scream. She wanted to. The scream was there, fully formed, at the back of her throat, but her body would not let it out. Her body had gone utterly rigid in the way that bodies do when the danger is too close and too large, and running feels worse than stillness. She looked at the shadow for a long time. It did not move. It did not move, but it was breathing. She could see its edges shifting very slightly, very rhythmically, in and out, in and out. Slow. Much too slow. The same rhythm as Kai. Jo. Lena's voice from the doorway, sharp and strange and pulled tight with fear. Jo, turn around. Right now? Turn around slowly and look at Kai. She turned around. Kai was standing up. He had not made a sound when he stood. He had not made a sound at all. And he was standing very close. Closer than he should have been. Close enough that she could see the detail of his face perfectly, the way she could never have seen it in the dark of this room without the flashlight, which meant the room was no longer dark, which meant there was light coming from somewhere else, some source she could not identify, a pale and sourceless glow that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Kai was looking at her now, directly at her. His eyes were on her face, and they were the right color and the right shape and absolutely, completely, entirely wrong. Jo, he said. Her name. Perfectly. His voice, his exact voice, the right pitch, the right warmth. And her heart broke open and tried to run toward the sound before her brain caught up and said, no. Stop. Listen. The breath was wrong. He was speaking her name in his voice, and it was perfect, but the breath underneath it, the small involuntary sound of a person breathing, was not right. It was too regular. Like a machine running. Like something that had listened to breathing for a long time and learned to copy it, but had never understood that breathing is supposed to have variation, supposed to catch when you are scared or release when you laugh, supposed to be different every single time. It breathed like something that did not need to breathe, doing so only because it had watched and learned that this was what humans did. You found me, Kai said, and smiled Kai's smile. Jo took one step backward. How long have you been here? She asked. Her own voice was steadier than she had any right to expect. Good. She needed it steady. She needed to think. The thing wearing Kai's face tilted its head, too far, a degree or two past what is natural, and said, I have been here since you came. She understood then. Not everything. Not all at once. But enough. The text, come find me, had not been from Kai. Or rather, it had been from Kai's phone and Kai's contacts, sent to the one person who would come. The one person who knew the knock. The one person who would climb the stairs in the dark for love of him. She understood that whatever this thing was, it had found Kai first. And it had learned him. It had studied everything. The knock, the voice, the eyes, the smile, with the patience and precision of something that had been doing this for a very long time. Something that had done it before with other people, other knocks, other voices. Something that lived in old dark houses at the end of streets where the lights were broken and waited for the kind of person who would come when called. And she understood, with a cold clarity that felt almost like calm, that if she ran, if she bolted for the door right now, it would not matter. It knew everything about her that it needed to know. Her name, her voice, what she was most afraid of losing. It had learned her through Kai the way you learn a language through a dictionary, not by living in it, but by holding all the words very carefully and waiting for your moment to use them. Jo, Marcus said, from the doorway, in the lowest whisper she had ever heard. Don't move. Just don't move. Lena has her hand on the door. We are going to walk out of here very slowly. The thing wearing Kai turned its head toward Marcus. It turned it smoothly, at a perfectly human pace, and it looked at him with Kai's eyes, and then it smiled. A slow, spreading smile that went slightly too wide at the corners, and it said, in Kai's voice, oh, you brought friends. Marcus went rigid. Run, Jo said. Not quietly. She did not need to be quiet anymore. Marcus. Lena. Run. Right now? Get out of the house. Don't stop. She did not wait to see if they listened. She ran herself, straight at the thing wearing Kai's face, because the only way through was through, and it flinched. It actually flinched, pulling back slightly as if surprised, which told her something important, something she filed away in the back of her mind. It was not used to people running toward it. It was used to people being drawn toward it, slowly, carefully, by love and longing and hope. It was not built for a direct charge. She hit the doorframe hard, stumbled, caught herself on the hallway wall, and ran. She ran for the staircase with the broken banister, Marcus and Lena already ahead of her, their footsteps hammering down the dark stairs, and behind her, she heard Kai's voice calling her name. Once, twice, 3 times. Each time slightly less like Kai, and slightly more like something else, something lower and more patient, the performance slipping as its audience pulled away. The ground floor, the hallway, the open door ahead, and then they were out. Cold night air, the broken streetlights, the quiet empty street. They ran all the way to the corner and then kept running for another block before they stopped, hands on knees, breathing in great ragged gasps. Nobody spoke for a long time. They called the police. The police came. They went into the house on Mercer Street with good flashlights and body cameras and 4 of them together, and they found nothing. The house was empty. The carpet on the second floor was dry and clean. The room at the end of the hallway had no trace of anyone having been there in years. There was no footprint in the dust by the front door. But the detective, a tired-looking woman in a gray coat who had been on the force for 22 years, stood in the middle of the second-floor hallway for a long time after the others had declared the house clear, and she looked at the door at the end, and she did not go toward it. Joe, watching from behind the police tape at the front of the house, saw the detective standing there and not going, and she understood that the woman felt it too. The pull of the door, the warmth of the handle and memory, the sense of something behind it that knew your name. Kai was never found. His case stayed open. Marcus moved away 6 months later. Lena stopped answering Joe's calls, and Joe eventually stopped trying. There are things that separate people who have stood together in the dark, not the dark itself, but the disagreement afterward about what the dark contained. Marcus believed they had seen something real and was afraid of it. Lena believed they had seen nothing and was afraid of herself for running. Joe knew exactly what she had seen and was not afraid of it. And that was the strangest outcome of all, because the lack of fear troubled her more than the fear would have. She moved to a new apartment, a good one, on a well-lit street. She slept soundly for 3 months. And then, one night in November, she woke at 3 in the morning for no reason she could name, in the deep and breathless dark of her own bedroom, and she lay very still and she listened. From the wall to her left, the shared wall between her apartment and the one next door, she heard it. 2 knocks. A pause. 2 more. Her blood stopped. She stared at the ceiling for a very long time. Then she reached over and turned on the bedside lamp. The room was exactly as it should be. Her things, her furniture, her clothes on the chair in the corner. She picked up her phone and checked the neighbor's name in her building contacts. The apartment to her left. Unit 4B. The listing said the unit was vacant. Had been vacant since August. No tenant. She sat up in bed and thought about the knocking. And she thought about how the thing in the house had learned Kai. And she thought about how learning a person fully, every private signal, every secret knock, every sound and word that nobody else knows, takes proximity, takes time, takes being close enough, for long enough, to absorb someone from the inside out. She thought about how long she had been in this apartment. 3 months. 3 months of sleeping 8 feet from an empty unit. 3 months of her own voice, her own sounds, her own nighttime habits bleeding through a shared wall. The knocking came again. 2 knocks. A pause. 2 more. And Joe understood, with a cold and absolute certainty, that she had not escaped the house on Mercer Street. The house on Mercer Street had followed her home. She stood up. She walked to the shared wall. She pressed her palm flat against the cold plaster. And from the other side, something pressed back. She could feel it through the wall. Not a knock this time, but a steady, even pressure. The pressure of a hand. The pressure of something that had been standing on the other side of this wall for months, breathing slowly, learning everything. "I know you're there," she said. "Nothing. I know what you are." The pressure against her palm did not change. In, out, in, out. That same mechanical breathing, too regular, too patient. And then, from the other side of the wall, in a voice she had not heard in 11 years, a voice that belonged to a little girl she used to be, a voice from her own childhood, her own past, a voice that could not possibly exist outside of her own memory. It spoke. It said, in perfect childlike clarity, "Ready or not." Jo pulled her hand from the wall. She stood in the center of her bedroom in the lamplight, and her mind went to a place it had been circling for 3 months without quite landing. The night on Mercer Street. The room at the end of the hall. The thing wearing Kai's face. She had run from it. She had run through it, charged at it, hit the doorframe, stumbled, caught herself on the wall. She had run out of the house. Or had she? Jo stood in her bedroom, and she thought about the months since Mercer Street. She thought about how she had slept without dreaming, how she had eaten without hunger, how she had called Lena's name and Lena had stopped answering. And she had assumed it was fear, but what if it was something else? What if Lena had heard something in her voice the first time she called and had recognized something off, something wrong, some note that was almost right, but not quite? She walked to the bathroom. She turned on the light. She stood in front of the mirror. Her face looked back at her. The right face, the right eyes, the right jaw, the right nose, the small scar on her chin from a fall when she was 9. She looked at her reflection for a very long time. And then she breathed. In, out, in, out. Slow, even, mechanical. Not a single variation. Not a catch of surprise. Not a release of relief. Just the perfect, regular rhythm of something that had watched breathing for a long time and learned to copy it, but had never understood that breathing is supposed to change. The thing in the mirror smiled Kai's smile. No, Jo's smile. Her smile. The smile it had learned perfectly and tilted its head just a fraction of a degree too far. And from the bedroom behind her, from the direction of the shared wall, the real Jo, the one who had hit the doorframe and stumbled and been left behind in the confusion, the one who had been standing on the other side of that wall for 3 months, knocking and knocking and knocking, began to scream. The thing in the mirror did not flinch. It turned off the bathroom light. The screaming stopped. The apartment was very quiet. The thing that was wearing Jo's face walked back to the bed and lay down and closed its eyes and breathed in its perfect, even way. And in the morning it would make coffee and go to work and speak to people who thought they knew Jo, and not one of them would notice that her breathing never changed, that her eyes never quite tracked the way eyes are supposed to track, that the laughter came always at exactly the right moment and never a half-second late the way real laughter does. And in the empty apartment next door, the thing that had followed her from Mercer Street, the first one, the original, stood in the dark in the silence and thought about the next address, the next name, the next person who could be reached. There are always more people who loved someone enough to go looking in the dark. There are always more games of hide and seek, and the seeker never wins. If you enjoyed this horror story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell icon for more terrifying stories.